It doesn't matter what game the government plays, what game the dictator plays. It doesn't matter how the government frames its actions. It doesn't matter how the government defines its actions publicly. It doesn't matter how the government sells its actions. It doesn't matter about the web of deceit that it weaves around its actions. It doesn't matter what sort of neuro-linguistic programming it uses to attempt to cloak and throw a smokescreen around and pull the wool over people's eyes about its actions. The fact is, the government of Australia and New Zealand and in governments in America and Germany are dictatorships now. They're police states. They've imposed martial law. Doesn't matter what excuse they've given. Evil people do the worst things and they always have an excuse. Yeah? It's a necessary evil, or they're protecting somebody, or they feel it's just. They feel they're entitled. And when it comes down to it, it's because people feel entitled to something, that they do something. And this is our biggest problem with human nature. People in the government now feel entitled to tell you how to live your life. Bill Gates feels entitled to tell you how to live your life. The cult of Judah, priests, high priests, elites, feel entitled to tell you how to live your life. They also feel entitled to the best of the best. They feel entitled to rule. They feel entitled to live in absolute luxury. They feel entitled to live as gods. And it doesn't matter how your government frames its actions. You have to look at its actual actions. In America, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, lots of other countries, the government is a tyrant. It's a dictator. It's dictating. It's taken away all your human rights. Because as I said before, the United Nations Convention of Human Rights states clearly in its articles that if the United Nations declares a state of emergency, you have no human rights. So you forget about the United Nations, even forget about your government's legal system, because every legal system in the world I know of says if the government defines you as a criminal, you have no human rights. You have no freedoms, no liberties. You're a slave. The moment the government defines you as a criminal, you become a slave. They can lock you up. They can force you to work. Yeah? They can put you in a concrete box. It's all legal. This is justice system apparently in action. Now, all the government has to do is invent a new law to make you a criminal. Yeah? It can say homosexuality is a crime. It can say smoking marijuana is a crime. It can say growing herbs, medicinal herbs is a crime. It can say prescribing hydroxychloroquine is a crime. It can say standing closer than 1 meter to someone in public is a crime. It can say meeting your friends is a crime. It can say that kissing your wife at your wedding is a crime. It can say that demanding to see your newborn child is a crime. It can say that going home from school to stay with your family after in school vacation is a crime. It can say walking 2 meters in this distance across the border is a crime. Do you see how easy it is? Government can invent a crime just like that, and it's done so. And once it invents a crime, anybody that breaks that law is a criminal, and they have no human rights. They become a slave, a prisoner. Yeah? So basically everyone in Australia, New Zealand, Germany, in the States and America where they've had these lockdowns and the new laws, these laws that force you to wear a face mask, the laws of social distancing, the laws that close down your businesses, prevent you from having public gatherings, these laws are all intended to make you a criminal and therefore a slave. When the World Health Organization totally made up this total bogus pandemic, which is proven factually, epidemiologically, proven now, is no more dangerous than any seasonal flu, for which we've never ever declared a state of emergency and lockdowns and destroyed the world economy for. Yeah, when the government did this, when the World Health Organization declared a health emergency, with no deaths, with no justification, and no reason, no excuse, it meant that the United Nations Convention of Human Rights becomes null and void. And then it allowed governments, using this excuse, to make up new laws to make you a criminal, and therefore make you a slave. You can't even leave your prison country, just like the Soviet Union. Iron Curtain, Berlin Wall. It's in place now. It's no different. Now you have to forget, you have to overlook and look through the web of lies that they have woven around their actions, how they have framed their actions, how they have interpreted their actions for you, how they have sold their actions. The reasons they have given for their actions, you have to totally ignore because there's no reason to take them seriously. They are bogus. They are just smokescreens. The reasons they have given for their actions are not scientific. They've been demonstrated to be false, lies, mendacious. Yes? Most of you already have immunity to COVID. Even Oxford University released a study recently that even Oxford University, using the most conservative measures, now assumes that half of the British population are already immune to COVID. And that COVID began spreading in January, long before any World Health Organization, even before Wuhan. That this COVID was present among the population and spreading. That very few people have faced any risk at all from COVID. It's usually people very, very old who are going to die in the next few weeks anyway from something else, if not old age itself. Even Ferguson's original model said that up to 2/3 of the people who would die from COVID would have died anyway. It's that absurd. Now, my point, you can go back and watch my videos and read my books, and you can do research online yourself. But my point for this video is, you have to overlook the web of lies and deceit that's been woven around the government's actions. We're talking about framing. The government has imposed martial law, and it's framing its actions as being for the protection of the public from a health threat, from a pandemic. In the same way that before the Patriot Act, they framed their actions of martial law as being a response to an imminent threat of weapons of mass destruction from Iraq. Yeah? It's framing, and you have to think about that. You have to look at the facts of what your government is doing. You have to look at the actual facts on the ground, the lowest level of abstraction, the lowest level of composition. You have to look through the framing, the filters, the goggles they've put on your face. You have to look past the way they are trying to justify and explain their behavior, because they are lying. Their actions, okay, some people may believe the propaganda themselves, yeah, it's possible. But the people who actually began this whole scam, the people who are taking away all your rights and liberties and enslaving you, they know exactly what they're doing. They may think it's a noble lie. They may think that the ends justify the means, but this is not our argument here. That's for them to prove. If the ends justify the means, then they should be publicly, openly arguing what exactly it is they're trying to achieve. And if they can convince us, because their argument's compelling, then we could go along without all these unnecessary costs. All the suicides, all the deaths of people from untreated medical conditions, people dying alone, yeah, total destruction of the economy. It's all planned anyway. So that's basically my point. You have to look past the framing. You have to look past the story, the narrative. They're giving you a particular narrative to justify their behavior. You found somebody in your bedroom at night, and they're going through your cupboards, and they have your jewelry in their hands. Yep. And you're going to ask them, "What are you doing here?" And they'll make up a narrative to explain their behavior. And then you go, "Oh, okay, I understand. Continue." And you go back to sleep. Really? Yeah? No, you don't do that, do you? And you can't do that with your government. You have to look through the narrative. You have to question the narrative. You have to find the alternative narratives that explain what is happening, which people like me are trying to give you. Anyway, ciao for now. People like to refer to ancient philosophers, especially to Plato, as authorities. So here's something that will put the Second Amendment in perspective. And this is what Plato writes in the Laws. It is preferable to sacrifice even the city itself if the alternative is willingly tolerating the slavish yoke of being ruled by worse men or departing from the city in exile. All such things must be borne and suffered rather than allowing the regime to be changed into one whose nature is to make human beings worse. Plato just said, in no uncertain terms, what the writers of the Second Amendment wrote, that there are some things which is right and just and correct and, unavoidable that you sacrifice everything for, including the city, the state, the nation. Because the city and state and nation do not exist for themselves. They exist to allow people to be as good as possible, to become as good as possible, as virtuous as possible, to pursue as much happiness and joy as possible, which Plato and Socrates and most philosophers assume comes from virtue, that the best chances at happiness are from living a virtuous life, and that the state and the city and all the laws and everything exists to that end. The city and the state and the laws cannot be allowed to exist simply to enrich a very few corrupt people, as they do today. If that nation stops serving the very best principles that humans can strive for, then there's no reason to have that nation. The people who wrote the Constitution realized that human nature and society tends towards tyranny and fascism and dictatorship, and that you can't trust your government, that sooner or later your government will turn on you, that people in government will become obsessed with power and they'll start thinking that they know better than the rest of the people. Sometimes maybe they do, but history has shown they don't. But basically the Second Amendment writers put the Second Amendment in place so that Americans, when the time came, and they knew it would come sooner or later, when the time came, the Americans had the chance to defend themselves. Now, my experience in life, and probably anybody who's come up against authority and come up against power from a position of weakness, has been that you don't get justice. Justice is for the strong. Yeah? And the only way you get justice is by forcing unjust people to respect you. And I would be the last person to want any violence, because violence works towards the interests of the cult of Judah. They want violence. But people have to show that they're prepared to defend their rights, or they won't get to keep their rights.
Used to be the